Thank you Paperlike for sponsoring this video. Hey guys, so I've had this M4 iPad Pro for about 2 weeks now. This is the 11-inch version, and while 2 weeks might not be a whole lot, I did get to use it quite intensively. I even took it on a trip to Poland with me to meet my friend and fellow YouTuber Johannes, day in the life video on the channel, and by using it in all these different scenarios, I definitely got a chance to discover some clear pros and cons of this iPad, the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you will. Let's ramble.
Hold up, place go wild when I pull up. They all on me like it wants some.
Right, so let's start with the good, and there are a lot of good things to be said about this iPad. First of all, there's the design. I'm really digging this space black colorway. I have the same color on my M3 Max MacBook Pro, and in my opinion, it's the best color Apple has dropped so far. It does smudge a little bit, but not nearly as much as, say, the midnight color on the M2 MacBook Air, so I'm okay with that. Another very notable difference in the design is of course the size and weight. These new iPads are incredibly thin. The 11-inch is only 5.3 millimeters thin, and the 13-inch is even thinner and comes in at 5.1 millimeters, making it not only the thinnest iPad, but the thinnest Apple device ever made. I was afraid it would bend very easily, especially if you recall the Bendgate fiasco on one of the previous models, but it seems to be holding up really well. Apple has managed to fortify the body, and they did a good job at it. It's honestly very impressive how Apple managed to stuff this much technology into the iPad while keeping the body almost impossibly thin, especially when you consider there's not one but 2 OLED panels in there, a new technique Apple calls tandem OLED. Speaking of OLED, the screen looks absolutely phenomenal. It's definitely one of the nicest OLED panels, if not the nicest OLED panel I've ever seen on a mobile device. Now, is it leaps better than the Liquid Retina XDR display? No, but it is better, and that makes it the best display the iPad has ever had. It has 1000 nits full screen brightness and up to 1600 nits in HDR, and that is quite a lot for an OLED panel. If you're coming from the 12.9-inch M2 iPad Pro, that might not impress you much, but it's twice as much as the 11-inch M2 iPad Pro, and the difference is very, very noticeable. What surprised me the most is that the speakers sound pretty much as good as the speakers on the M2, and that's impressive because you would expect there to be an acoustic disadvantage due to the thinner body. And they sound great both in landscape and portrait mode. Equally impressive is the battery life, which Apple managed to keep at 10 hours, give or take. And again, all within that thin and light body. Now, some of the things I mentioned in the good list also come back in the bad list, including the battery. It'll make sense when we get to that point in the video. Now, one of my personal favorites in this good list is the position of the front-facing camera. I've been complaining about that stupid side angle for years, and they finally addressed it. Hallelujah. Thank you, Apple. Okay, so this is the front-facing camera of the iPad and the internal mics. The mics have always been pretty decent, but this is so much better than that weird side angle. Unfortunately, it's still only 1080p, and for some reason it doesn't give 24, only 30 frames a second or 60. But anyway, this is so much better. How it took them so long to do this, I will never understand. I always thought it had something to do with the fact that the Apple Pencil pairs and charges up top, but apparently they managed to fix it. The magnets have definitely moved, which could explain why the Apple Pencil 2 does not work with this iPad, but we'll get to that later. The front-facing camera is not the only thing that changed. Apple actually removed the 10 megapixel ultra-wide camera and left only the 12 megapixel wide camera. I'm not sure if a lot of people are going to be salty about that. I personally couldn't care less. I've used my iPad Pro to shoot videos exactly 0 times in my life, and the only reason I ever use the camera on the iPad is to scan slides or documents. And for that use case, the new camera system actually got better. Between the adaptive flash and the LiDAR scanner, and of course a sprinkle of that AI, the iPad got much better at eliminating shadows from documents. Anyone who's ever tried to scan documents with the iPad knows what a pain it can be to find the right position so your body isn't blocking some light source, creating a shadow over the document. It's almost impossible sometimes. So this feature is a real useful quality of life improvement to me. A couple more good things to mention before we move on to some not so great stuff. The new Magic Keyboard is nice. Almost everything about it is an improvement over the previous one. I love the aluminum base. It feels much more like you're typing on a MacBook now. The trackpad is better too, again with the haptic feedback resembling the trackpad experience on the MacBooks. And of course, we finally got a function row. That was painfully absent from the previous Magic Keyboard, and I'm very glad it's here. Just quickly adjusting light, volume, etc. on the keyboard is nice, and we finally have an escape key. Now the angles on the new Magic Keyboard are different. It tilts back much further than the old Magic Keyboard, which I like. I was a bit concerned about the weight distribution and the iPad tipping over, but that doesn't seem to be the case. The iPad sits noticeably lower on the Magic Keyboard, which I'm sure will help, and of course the iPad itself is lighter. All in all, I love the feel of this Magic Keyboard. I know some people were a bit concerned about the aluminum parts on the keyboard potentially scratching the glass on the iPad, but Apple fixed that by applying a rubber edge around the keys, keeping the glass away from all that aluminum. The new Apple Pencil is really cool too. I didn't think I would care that much, especially since I'm not an artist, but even for handwriting, it got a bit better. The squeeze function is useful. You squeeze the barrel and the menu pops up that lets you select pens, brushes, erasers, etc. And a really neat touch is that Apple created software-based shadows in the shape of the actual tools you're using. Let's say you pick the fountain pen. Instead of seeing the shadow the Apple Pencil would cast, you will see an animated shadow of the fountain pen. Is it useful? Absolutely not. But it's definitely a very cool thing. The haptic feedback you get when you squeeze the barrel feels convincing, and the barrel roll option is really cool too, especially if you're an artist or into things like calligraphy. Personally, I use the Apple Pencil mainly for note-taking. I'm a big handwritten notes guy. For some reason, it sticks with me longer, and in meetings, I feel like it's much less of a distraction than typing while the other person is talking. I do need my paper-like screen protector for that. I can't stand the slippery feeling of the pencil directly on the glass surface, and a paper-like screen protector offers that bit of drag, that resistance you need to make it feel like you're writing on actual paper. The nanodot technology and those little microbeads provide the pencil with haptic feedback. I've had a paper-like on all my iPads for as far as I can remember. My paper-like for this M4 iPad Pro is in the mail, and I can't wait to apply it. Now, you might wonder why I didn't just get the nano texture iPad instead. Well, for two reasons. One is that while it reduces glare and fingerprints, it does not offer the same feedback to the pencil. And two, perhaps more importantly, every screen protector will show some form of wear and tear over an extended period of use. Little micro scratches will start showing, things like that. If that ends up happening to the nano texture, it's done. Damaged means damaged forever. My friend and fellow YouTuber Kyle Erickson already scratched his brand new M4 iPad Pro after just a few days of owning it. Not a fun experience. By the way, if you don't know Kyle yet, definitely check out his channel. He makes some great content. Anyway, when my paper-like eventually starts looking a little less fresh over time, I can simply peel it off and apply a new one. Every order comes with 2 screen protectors, so it will last me a long time. So yeah, for me, paper-like is still the way to go. If you want to try it out for yourself, there's a link in the description. Now, we've had a lot of good stuff to say about this new iPad. Let's move on to the bad stuff. Let's start with the thickness of this iPad. It's incredibly thin. And yes, I did just mention that in my good list as well, but I want to mention it here too, because if I'm being honest, personally, I would have much preferred to keep the thickness as it was before, if that means getting more battery life. To me, that's way more important than having an impossibly thin iPad. Of course, that would also mean a heavier iPad, and that would probably affect the balance when it's placed inside the Magic Keyboard. I'm sure Apple had its reasons for making it this thin, but yeah, for me, a bigger battery would have been the much better choice. Now, let's talk about the Magic Keyboard. Yes, I did mention that in my good list too. And overall, it's a really, really nice keyboard, but it's not so nice for those people who paid a lot of money for the previous Magic Keyboard. Maybe you just bought one for your M2 iPad Pro not too long ago, and because you want to upgrade to the M4, you're now going to have to spend hundreds of dollars again on a new keyboard. I also really don't like that Apple stuck with that nasty material on the outside. It smudges, it gets super dirty really easily, it scuffs. Surely they could have found a better material for that. And this hinge, it looks super cool, but it's very impractical. I was used to placing the hinge of the previous Magic Keyboard on the table to open up the iPad. But if you try that with this one, since it doesn't have that protective layer, it'll slide all over the place, which makes it much harder to open the iPad. I'm also very curious to see how it holds up over time. I can't really see this staying scratch-free, but we'll see. Equally infuriating is the fact that your Gen 2 Apple Pencil will not work with this iPad. And yes, I know the position of the magnets has changed because of the positions of the camera has changed, and therefore the positions of the magnets inside the Apple Pencil had to change as well. But this is Apple, and call me cynical, but they're very good at finding ways to make you buy stuff over and over again, and I can't help but think that some of this could have been avoided. But with that said, there really isn't that much more bad stuff to say about this iPad. It's a truly impressive piece of hardware and clearly the best iPad Apple has ever produced, which brings me to the last part of this video, the ugly. Those of you who've been around the channel for a bit have heard me say this more than a couple of times, pretty much ever since the M1 iPads dropped. But here we go again. What good is all of this amazing hardware if it's powered by iPadOS, which, let's face it, is still not much more than a glorified iPhone operating system? Now, next month, Apple will be presenting the new iPadOS at WWDC, but honestly, I don't think we'll be seeing anything groundbreaking there to justify all this horsepower. Every single time we get newer, better, and faster iPads, we keep hoping to finally see a proper OS, not necessarily macOS, but something a lot closer to that. But every single time we're left disappointed by some minor upgrades to the same dull iPadOS. I think we might see some AI implementations that might be interesting, but not much more than that. And that really bothers me. It makes the iPad a lot less interesting as an everyday machine, let alone a laptop alternative. It does most things my MacBook can do, but almost everything feels like a workaround and takes way more time than what would take me just a few clicks on my MacBook. And please, Apple, please fix the Files app. Anyway, all eyes on Dub, which is only a few weeks away now. You never know, maybe this will be the one. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, subscribe for more content. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.